Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today in session 217 of Behavioral Observations. In this episode, I am joined by Dr. Lina Slim, and we had a wide-ranging conversation that's almost impossible to describe in a short list of bullet points, but I will try. In this show, we discussed how she pivoted from studying animal behavior and language to working with children with autism, her unease with seeing lackluster applications of applied behavior analysis when she first started her career and what she did as an alternative. And that includes starting her own school while at the same time earning her Ph.D., while at the same time raising two children. We talked about how she provides services quite literally all over the world and what it's like working in different cultures. And we spent a lot of time talking about cultural sensitivity and humility. And I think the most important part of the podcast for me was the advice she gave about detecting your own biases when providing services and what to do when you encounter them. It's really, really poignant stuff. And I encourage you to listen to that piece if you get nothing else from this podcast. We also talked about how to develop trust with stakeholders through asking questions, what it's like to practice ABA in 3 different languages. We spent a lot of time talking about this year's Verbal Behavior Conference, and as an aside, please consider attending if you're able to do so. She's giving a great presentation about collaboration and a whole host of other things. And she just had some fantastic advice for the newly minted BCBA, and frankly, BCBAs of all experience levels. So I, again, really encourage you to listen to this conversation all the way through. There are just a lot of really great points. You can learn more about Lina and the Verbal Behavior Conference in the show notes for this episode over at behavioralobservations.com. I also want to let you know before we get to the interview itself that we are brought to you by Rose Griffin's free masterclass, The Power of Joint Attention. This is a 30-minute course that will show you how to use books in therapy so your students are running over to listen to you read. The course also covers how to use songs in therapy so that your students are eager to participate and play and are ready to engage with you every session. Rose shares actionable tips that you can use in your next therapy session, and she provides bonus printables that you can use. Again, you can use them right away. So, in order to learn more, go to abaspeech.org and click the free masterclass tab at the top. We're also brought to you by our old friends, howtoaba.com. That's howtoaba.com. Their goal is to make you feel supported and confident while helping your clients make real progress. In their membership community, you'll find all the assessments, programs, data sheets, and materials you need so that your job is just a little bit easier. As a member, you'll also be invited each month to join a live CEU and a live mentorship program in their private community group. You'll also have access to their extensive CEU library of recorded on-demand CEUs on relevant practical topics to BCBAs in the field. And it's more than enough CEUs for recertification. With a behavior resource membership, you'll save time, feel confident, and master what you love. So to learn more, go to howtoaba.com/join. And when you join today, use the code BOP, and you'll receive 10% off a yearly subscription. And with that said, that's going to do it for opening remarks. So without any further delay, please enjoy this fun conversation with Dr. Lina Slim.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now, here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Dr. Lina Slim, welcome to Behavioral Observations. How's it going today?
Great. Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for having me over.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We've got so many things to talk about today. And I know we also had like a brief conversation earlier this morning as well. And so I want to ask about, as I always do, as my custom is to ask about how people got into ABA and things like that. And you had indicated that you had you wanted to go on a tangent when I asked that question. And of course, this podcast is all about tangents. So I'll just open it to you. So how did you get into ABA and take us on whatever tangent you had in mind?
Sure. The tangent is really relevant because I feel that by sharing some additional information about my journey, the conversation will shed additional light as to where it's coming from and the perspective that I have on this topic that we're going to talk about. So going backwards, I just want to share with everyone that I am born and raised in Lebanon, in Beirut, Lebanon, a country that is known for its diversity, cultural, linguistic, ethnic, political diversity. And so just to start there, early in the 60s and 70s, autism was only rarely known as a spectrum, and it was, what I've heard, was only known as like the savant, right? And the skilled people engaging in these amazing, wonderful things. And so, I was exposed to a lot of differences in looking at things, and that environment taught me to be extremely responsive and a good listener in order to adapt my responses accordingly. Moving forward, I came to the United States and got my master's in communication science disorders. And during my education, I really engaged in different clinical practica. And one of them was a clinic specializing in working with individuals with autism. And so I got exposed further to different approaches and didn't necessarily hear about ABA, but saw different approaches that piqued my interest in why are they using certain procedures over others.
Where were you doing, if you don't mind, where were you doing this work?
That was way back. I can't even in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay, got it. Okay,
in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at the University of Pittsburgh. Yes. Just to go backward quickly, my undergrad was in pre-medical studies with a concentration in animal behavior and psychology. So there was this component of also interacting with other health sciences in my background. And behavior, animal behavior. So I was interested already in behavior and why do animals behave in the way they do, but also why do people behave the way they do? So I had that interest in me already. And incidentally, I came to the United States, just for the readers to hear, is that I originally wanted to do primate education, understanding primates' language and behaviors as it relates to human language and behavior. And so that was originally what I really wanted to focus my attention. But then came here and ended up in communication science disorders, autism, one clinical practica. So that piqued my interest. Throughout my studies, I kept reading up on things. I completed my master's and then started, working in the public school sectors. And I noticed that there was a lot of, focus on young children with autism. And the programs that were in the public schools were kind of disparate, inconsistent, lacking some rigor, and having an interest and I've read a lot on animal behavior and behavior. A lot of what people were doing, that they were calling it at the time ABA, discrete trial training, is ABA at the time. And I'm going, that doesn't make sense. It's a science, and the application of it there's something wrong. That piqued my interest. And so I kind of was passionate about fixing that instructional practice, but didn't know how to. But then I started reading more and more, and then decided to, open my school. So
I want to hear more about that. But what struck you as odd about that early ABA exposure? Was there?
Yeah, I think your question is pointed, because it continues to be a misconception of what people think about ABA and apply it incorrectly when they don't have the proper training and education. So what struck me is that it was extremely robotic. It was isolated. It was not socially embedded. It was discrete and not meaningful. And again, it was not inclusive, and it wasn't systematically implemented. So the data that was being recorded was not necessarily differentiating the targets that were being taught in a way. And the prompts that were supported, that were in place, were not necessarily individualized. They were kind of like a systems, a one size fits all. And that did not at all work for me, because we are all individuals having the background of this diversity, that attention to differences, all of that, and having meaningful applications didn't make sense. The children were not necessarily engaged. Attending was a problem. There was a lot of engagement in interfering behaviors that were not addressed appropriately, either through overcorrection or physical handling. And it just was extremely sad and frustrating on me, to the point where it led me to basically, I kind of said, thank you very much. I will be resigning from this wonderful duty, but I will open up my school and focus on something that I believe is needed at the time. And it was 2004 when I decided to start my school program, ASAP, a Step Ahead program, for children with autism that employs a transdisciplinary approach and applies behavioral learning principles in the teaching of the children, and including the families, as well as a team of health science professionals as part of the team. So it was integrated, it was transdisciplinary, it was interprofessional, and the families were at the center. And the entire instructional practice was based on the behavior analytic principles and conceptual analysis of instruction and all. So the science, that's what I wanted.
Got it. So where, and was this still in that area of Pittsburgh, or did you open the school elsewhere?
No, then I moved to New Jersey, and that was in New Jersey. The school was in New Jersey. Right.
I see.
Yeah.
So at that point, so you were a speech therapist?
At that point, you're absolutely right. I opened my school, went back to school to get my board certified behavior analysis certification, and went back to school to get my doctoral degree, Ph.D. So all of that while having my school program. So how wonderful, with 2 kids.
Oh my gosh.
So yes. So my journey in behavior analysis really blossomed starting 2004 and thereafter. And so that's how from the beginning, interest in behavior and animal behavior, and living in such a diverse environment and culture and community, coming here, being faced with a different culture that I needed to learn and adapt to, and then having to learn a new way, which is really what was in line with how I was seeing the world. So behavior analysis fits exactly, answers my questions, is at the core and the essence of how I look at the world and solve problems and relate with people and communicate. So it's really my essence.
Being a behavior professional is hard, but at How to ABA, our goal is to make your job just a little easier. Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna, and we're here to personally invite you to join over 3,000 ABA professionals in our Behavior Resource membership.
Inside the membership, you'll find all the assessments, programs, data sheets, and materials you need to teach children with autism so that they make real progress. We even include how-to videos for you.
As a member, you will be invited each month to attend a live CEU on a variety of meaningful topics that you can actually use, in addition to an extensive library of recorded on-demand CEUs that you can access anytime. We give you more than enough for recertification.
And when you're stuck, we have our private members-only community group that's not on Facebook. Whether you're a beginner or a long-time practitioner, you'll benefit from a supportive community behind you.
Imagine an all-in-one resource to save you time and help your clients. Imagine having support and getting your toughest questions answered. And imagine being a part of a collaborative private group of professionals to share ideas.
So go to howtoaba.com/join. And when you join today, use the code BOP. You'll receive 10% off a yearly subscription, which includes CEUs.
In our conversations, and we've met previously at conferences and things like that, it sounds like you're always flying off to somewhere, right? I did so you do a lot of international work, and I think so I'd like to talk about that, and I'd like to talk about that in the context with some of the things that you've written about as well on cultural sensitivity and bias and things along those lines. First, though, if you can give the listeners an idea of the range of, I guess, geographic areas that you've worked and either historically or currently, because I'd like to, obviously behavior analysis is this kind of like North American thing,
Right.
but there are there are inroads being made all over the place, and how that's happening is probably another several podcasts, which we won't get into, but I want to hear more directly about your experience. So tell me a little bit about the different places you've worked, and I'd like to hear about what in particular what the different framing, if you will, of autism spectrum disorders are from, does it vary and things along those lines. So yeah,
Sure.
if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. So I've worked and consulted, of course, across the United States in different states that have their own individual cultures, believe it or not.
Fair enough, yeah.
You need to really understand that as well. So this is a multicultural United States. And then North America, of course, Canada, and Italy. So in Europe, as well as Middle East, so Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and the neighborhoods, also India. So that's totally different. Also, the country has multiple languages and multiple different ways of living their own cultures within it, and so that as well. North Africa. And so there are amazing differences, beautiful varieties of living that we are not necessarily exposed to at all times. Obviously, if we're in our area and we have no way to leave the area, people come into our areas that carry their own cultures from different geographical areas, different countries, and so forth. So to handle or to better address challenges that we may face when working with families, even in our area, there are a few things that we need to do on our own to improve our way of communicating and relating and building relationships, trusting relationships, respectful relationships, not only with the families that we work with, but also with the professionals within that environment, within those areas and countries and cultures that we work with. The first one is we really need to look at ourselves. We ourselves are the product of our learning history, past and current. And so we carry inherent biases and assumptions. And that is exactly how we move about in our environment, because we respond to our community accordingly. And we learn how to behave based on the contingencies within which we are interacting in response to those. And so we need to recognize that, be aware of it by tacting it, labeling it when we experience those covert biases and assumptions. So the first step is we're sitting having a conversation with whoever we are, our other colleagues or parents and family members, and then we hear something they're saying, or the way they're saying it, or an accent they have, or lack of language production, or whatever it is they're saying. The first thing is to sit back and capture the emotions that we are going through, the feelings, the thoughts, because thinking is behaving. And so we're doing that covertly. We need to stop and think about what is our covert responses, label them, recognize them, and then put them aside so that you can be fully present during the communication and that relationship building, so that you can listen to the other versus listening to your own verbal behavior. And so you're shelving it, you recognize it, you accept that it's present, but you need to say, okay, let me listen, let me be other oriented. So reflecting on own, and then reflecting on what is the other person, the families that are coming from different cultures, that use a different language. What are their values? What are their assumptions? What are they saying? What are their preferences? And then be able to prevent our biases and assumption influence our responding and our recommendations, but instead listening and validating for the purpose of understanding the other's perspective, and being able then to come forth with meaningful and functional suggestions and support systems that will meet the value system, the norms, and the culture of the families that you're working with within the countries they live in, within their political system and support systems. So, that's really critical, that we need to start with the self.
I see. That reminds, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, but it just reminds me, it's the great advice of one of my first bosses gave me. And she told me, when you're working with families, she said, pick the target behavior. If you're trying to address some sort of skill or deficit or something like that, she said, pick the thing that's most important to them, not you. And it sounds like, and one of the things that I guess a bias, a couple of biases I have certainly are things like bedtimes and sleeping in their own bed, and then like sitting at the table for, family dinners and things like those are values and biases of mine. And if I was consulting to a family in the home setting, I have to be aware that those are things I would like to see, because those are preferences that I have based off of my learning history and things like that. And they may not necessarily be the priority of the parents. They might have other things that are higher up on the to-do list. So I think that is just we could stop the podcast right now if we wanted to, and I think that would be a good message to leave the audience with. But I know you have more to say on this.
Oh, there's so much to say, and I think we need to kind of have a mindset of asking questions to be informed, not to be informed to assert that what we think of is right, or what we are thinking of doing will be the right thing, but to be informed as to what the others, the families, the colleagues, whoever you're talking with, what are they? What are their belief systems? What is it that concerns them? How do they see the world the way they see it? Not how do we see the world the way we see it? And that way, if we get informed in that way, we can then provide the support systems that will be adopted by them, be welcomed, and building trust happens that way, because you're walking into the lives of those families, into their homes, and you're not a disruptor. You're supposed to be the person who's there to help. We serve people. We're servants. That's what we do. We want to serve and support and help. We're not here to impose our own ideas. And that's tricky.
Hey everyone, we're going to take a real quick break here and get right back to the interview. But in case you missed it at the beginning, I want to let you know that Rose Griffin's free masterclass, The Power of Joint Attention, is available. It's a 30-minute course that will show you how to use books and songs and all sorts of things like that in your sessions with your learners, so they come running to you, they're ready to play, and they just really have a great time. This class also shares actionable tips that you can use. There's bonus printables. There's all sorts of great stuff that you can learn about today and use tomorrow. So to learn more, go to abaspeech.org and click the free masterclass tab at the top of the page. Again, that's abaspeech.org and click on the free masterclass. Let me ask you a devil's advocate question, because as much as I'm resonating with what you're saying here, there might be some times where, based on the practitioner's experience, you might know where something's going developmentally, whereas the parent, they're an N of one with their child, whereas we as practitioners have multiple observations of dozens, maybe hundreds of clients that we've seen throughout our careers. What would you say might be some, ways to, I guess, appropriately or maybe persuade people, I guess where I'm going is that, if you see a repertoire of behavior that, based on your experience, is going to be a massive problem down the road, and that's still not a high priority on the family's list. And at the same time, you want to be attendant to what you just said, right? You want to say, okay, I've got my biases and things like that. I don't want to go in and be a disruptor, as you say, right? What is some advice you might have for I guess, nudging, or is it appropriate to do that, even if you know that, okay, this is impending, this is not going anywhere good if this client continues along this path here, but the parents want to, kind of work on this other thing over here. Do you see the conundrum?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we run into this every time. This is a very important question. Well, the first thing in a relationship with anyone is to try and create an environment that is reinforcing in your presence, correct? And that actually fosters and promotes a trusting relationship, where then both parties are more apt to listen to some suggestions from others. So first, you want to ask questions of what it is that the family members prioritize. You need to understand this. This is important. What is their priority? And then you ask them, okay, what's the long-term goal? Where do you see your child? What would you like your child to do? What is it that you want your child to do now and later, to better inform yourself and get informed and have information in regard to how you're going to move forward towards achieving the goal, the overall goal that family members have, because that is an important one to hold on to and celebrate once you get there. But then recognizing that, okay, validating that, and then picking a skill that they want, a small skill at a level that can be achieved relatively quickly, and suggesting if that would be appropriate for them to work on with you, and then having that implemented so that immediate positive feedback from the learner's outcome is contacted. Because that's the first step, is that everyone on the team needs to contact successful outcome. And over time, the more you contact that, it's going to be reinforcing the behaviors of the family members to come and ask questions. What's next? What we did was great. What do we do next? This opens up doors for you to suggest on a developmental continuum, or whatever you feel may be the next step, to say, how about we consider this? This will be supporting the next step. It will help your child communicate better their needs. It would help your child demonstrate that he wants you with him, and create opportunities for play, for social engagement. Maybe you can have meals together as a family, maybe share an activity together. So it's a step-by-step process where you first need to establish that reinforcing environment and contingencies around it by considering what the family's goals are.
Got it. So
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm making a little bit of a list here because I want to make sure that that listeners can absorb all this. So it seems like that, I guess step one is to kind of, again, I'm just paraphrasing what you're saying here. It sounds like to, kind of attack our own biases, to start building trust with the family by asking them what their priorities are, ask lots and lots of questions. And if we do see the need to address something that may be less of a priority for them, but we know that it's going to be something that will need to be addressed sooner rather than later. And that to set small, achievable goals so that they contact reinforcement.
Absolutely. Contacting reinforcement in the relationship building, in the process of observing positive outcome in their child's lives and behaviors, that is so important, because don't we all want our kids to be happy? Don't we all want to share that care and love and interaction? That's what we want. We're human beings. We are relationship based, and we're emotional responders. So as long as we are aware that we are emotional responders on all continuum, it's important to tackle those emotions and to be mindful of not allowing our own emotional biases interfere with the relationship, whereby probably better capture those emotions in order to share in the joy or the pain, which is where empathy and compassion comes in, to provide compassionate care, and one that is other-oriented and patient-centered or client-centered or person-centered. Person-centered is the preferred word for me.
Hey everyone, as a BCBA, meeting your continuing ed needs can be challenging at times. That's why I have made selected episodes of the Behavioral Observations podcast available for Type 2 continuing education credits. That's right. You can meet a portion of your professional development requirements on the go. Currently, we have CEs for topics including functional assessment, ethics, and supervision. Come learn from podcast favorites such as Greg Hanley, Pat Fryman, Mark Dixon, as well as many other amazing guests. For more information, head on over to behavioralobservations.com/get-CEs. One of the things I've always enjoyed in the couple of conversations we've had is, and I'm in awe of anyone who is, not just bilingual, but you're multilingual, right? I think our last time we chatted, you were like working on learning your fourth or fifth language. I've lost count, and it's something that I have tried and not succeeded in learning a couple of languages, and so again, it's something that for me, it's probably easier to I don't know, fly an airplane or something like that. But anyway. When you're working internationally, are you practicing in different languages as well? And what have you learned perhaps about that, if anything, or and if there are, I know there are plenty of BCBAs and other listeners who are bilingual. And I'm wondering if there are any lessons that you've learned practicing, whether it's in Arabic or French or whatever, and maybe going back and forth. Who knows? That you could share with the audience, and things that might be actually helpful for us, monolinguists, if you will. So.
This is actually more than you think a packed question, because it tackles the word language and it kind of focuses on one aspect of language, which is the language of the country or the language of the culture that you speak. So I'll address it. I'll address your question, and then I'm going to add a little bit more, because this is an important area to address. So multilingual, yes, I am. I speak fluently Arabic, French, and English, and I'm learning Spanish, being in Miami. That is the language here, and I'm excited because it's really a language that I really like, and it fits well with the French, so I'm acquiring it. So I inadvertently have an interest in languages. And so when I'm immersed within the culture that speaks the specific language, so it's either Arabic or French, I tend to be engaging in preparation behavior. So I read up a little bit more on the topic in the language of the area, if it's French or Arabic, because I do want to be able to relay information that is relevant and meaningful within the language system as best as I can. But again, engaging in a humble approach tells you that you're not superior, you don't know it all, and coming across as being humble is very important. So you come in and you say things like, I do speak the language, but it doesn't mean I'm competent in the culture. So the language itself does not translate into values and norms and habits and beliefs and assumptions. It's purely a text to voice language that has carried vocabulary meaning, and you try to impart and inform and translate and relate the meaning, but the meaning varies. Even the same word in that same language will have a different contextual, a different meaning based on the context within which it's used. So the first thing is to very humbly say, I speak the language, but I am not sure I will relay it in the way that is clear. So please ask questions, and I apologize ahead of time if I may offend inadvertently by using a word that may not be the right one within the context. So that's an important thing. I am trilingual, and I still engage in those statements because, again, being away from it, and even within the same country like the US, and I speak English, when I walk in, I always say, I may speak English and I may say things, but I apologize if they come across as at times insensitive, and I would appreciate if you let me know so that I learn and I prevent and avoid or learn new ways of communicating with you. So again, this is so important to understand language. Understanding language doesn't translate to understanding the culture. Right. And that's important because we have our own professional language as well. And so when we use that, although it's English and we use it to English speaking people, it's foreign. It's a foreign language. And we need to be aware of that, because as we communicate with the community we're in, the verbal behavior of our community will set the stage for how we need to communicate. So we need to translate. We are like translators, and interpreters. And that's a skill that's not taught really in school, but it is one that is so critical, especially if you want to build those relationships, if you want to be able to have a conversation where your suggestions and supports that you provide are adopted and respected, or, having that interaction and communication is, you need to have that translation of language.
Yeah. So the number of levels, I guess, that we could, that I suppose this topic implies for sure.
Oh my goodness. Great.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know if this is an aspect that you're referring to, but it's is there an element of, just in terms of even different figures of speech and slang that might vary, from one region to another. So if someone from Texas goes to Scotland, there's going to be different, yes, it's English. Yes, they're all speaking English, but there's going to be a lot of not just pronunciations and accents and things like that, but figures of speech and slang and everything that goes along with that. I imagine that the same thing is true when you're you're in the Middle East and you're maybe going from one country to another. They happen to both speak Arabic, but I'm just making an assumption here that there's a lot of those geographical those variations that based off of geographical locations and perhaps even more micro than that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because again, just if we're focusing on Arabic, you have the formal language, which everybody can do, write, and read. And then you have the language of the country that you're living in. And then you have the language of the area and the community you're within. So although I may be working in, let's say, Saudi Arabia, and I speak Arabic the Lebanese way, I still am learning another language because the word selections may be different. The accents are different. And so I'm actually learning how to speak a different Arabic, not only dialect, but language. So it's very interesting. And there's a lot of code switching that happens. And, the flexibility of code switching is just an amazing area, like, how you're constantly translating, how a multilingual person constantly translates the languages and the sounds and the interpretation.
Fascinating. We could talk about this for a long time, but what I do want to get into before we run out of time here is I know you're going to be talking at the Verbal Behavior Conference, and I'm very much looking forward to attending myself. So we're both going to be in Austin in just a few short weeks. It's coming right up, and you've got not one but two talks that you're doing, or like a part A, part B. So what I'd like you to do here, and I want you to resist the urge to I'm going to be very transparent about what we're doing here because I'm going to incentivize people to attend. And you can attend virtually if you don't want to go to Austin or if you can't travel and things like that. So I want you to tell us a little bit about what you're talking about, and without giving it all away here, of course. But I know you've got some interesting things to say, so let's hear a little bit about it.
All right. So basically, the part one is going to give an introduction of what speech language pathologists bring to the plate in terms of an understanding of the speech sound production and language, and how behavior analysts can contribute, and the expertise of both, how they're going to work together to impart that comprehensive approach to teaching speech and sound, because it certainly is very complex, intricate, and has multiple layers. And it's not necessarily speech production and sound production taught in behavior analysis in the education system. Of course not. It's not within the scope of practice, but definitely instructional practices. The science behind teaching is definitely within behavior analysis, and speech language pathology has their own ways as well. So it's going to talk about the structure and the function, and the part B is more focused on how are we going to do this, and how do we work together, and what are some strategies that are going to incorporate this systematic science-based while embracing the speech language pathology content and structure. And so together, it's very comprehensive. It's an introduction. It's going to be like a teaser. Even part A and part B are teasers, because there's so much, especially for folks that are working with people that need to improve their speech sound production and language.
I see. So if I were to just, I guess, encapsulate all that, by virtue of attending this and really digging into the content that you plan on presenting, the participant will be more able to productively collaborate with speech language pathologists and take advantage of the of people who have that background. Is that fair to say?
It is, and in addition, more is really raise awareness of the complexity of the targets that are being selected, and that it's not necessarily what teachers or behavior analysts might think of, like, oh, it's just this. There's more to it. So I think it raises awareness of the layers and the complexity that needs to be taught, and at what level and when and how.
All right. Well, I very much look forward to hearing that. And again, you guys can, in the audience, you can go to the show notes to this episode. You can Google Verbal Behavior Conference. It's very easy to find. So if this is something you're interested in, go ahead and sign up and register for it. There's a bunch of other great talks as well that are going to be going down in Austin, but also virtually. And just as to belabor the issue a little bit more, is that the virtual, we've gotten great feedback on the virtual attendees. It's done by Behavior Live, and Chris Kukin and all his colleagues just do an amazing job. It was being in the conference hall last year, watching those guys run around with all the microphones and the cameras and this and that, making sure everything's happening, answering questions in the chat and things like that. I was just marveling at the amount of effort they were putting in to make sure the virtual attendees were getting as close to a live experience or in-person experience as possible. It was really something to see. So, all right, so that is. That again, that's all going down at the end of March, and you can check out the show notes for this particular episode for links to sign up if you want to learn more about that. So, Lina, I there's so much here to. I think we're probably going to have another podcast because because there's so much to talk about here. I didn't get to half the things on my list. And that's usually indicative of a fun conversation here. So let's do this. How about you take us out with some advice for the newly minted BCBA, and then I'd like to have you back some other time to talk about whatever else is on your mind.
Would love to. Thank you. I think recognizing for the newly certified BCBAs, recognizing that having this certificate is just informing you that you have much more to learn. So this is a path of, now the learning starts, not the path of I have learned everything and now I need to just do what I think is right. So recognizing that leading with humility. So recognizing that there is more to learn, engaging in ongoing mentorship and training to gain competence in self-reflective practices that allow you as a new BCBA or BCABA to practice learning how to tact and label those covert biases and assumptions and be aware of them so that they don't influence your relationship building, respecting those you work with as equal members of the partner and partners of the team. So engaging in a mindful approach with cultural sensitivity and responsiveness. And that's important. Training in those skills that are under cultural competence, but it's not cultural competence in terms of understanding everything about the culture. It's about learning the skills of being culturally aware and sensitive so that you can learn more from others, and engaging in cultural reciprocity. And that's so important. So self-reflective practices, which is part of cultural reciprocity, which is humility in action. So self-reflection, active listening for the sake of learning the other's perspectives and assumptions, So you want to understand why it's important for the other person to have those ideas or suggestions and norms and values. And then number 3, validating that in sense that you say, I hear what you're saying. Can we share each one our thoughts? And I want you to share yours and your concerns. So engaging in validation that involves empathy and compassion. And the 4th is collaborating, which embeds within it some compromise, some role release and expansion, because when you collaborate, it means that the team, the person you are working with, parents, team members, or the community you're working with is on an equal platform. So you're working to listen and develop a shared joint practice. So awesome. It's a lot for new BCBAs. So that's why you have your certificate, but that means your journey has just begun.
Yes, that's why they call it a practice, right? Because it's right. never done. Yeah, just a couple. As you're talking about those bullet points, it reminded me of a book that I read in preparation for a talk that I gave for an organization a few months ago, and it's called Clinical Interviewing. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's like a gazillion editions, and it's written by a couple of I think they are licensed mental health counselors, and I'm blanking on the authors, but I'll run the reference down for the show notes. But it just encapsulated almost everything you said there, and especially there's a lot in there about active listening, paraphrasing. Things. It's really, really good, and it hits a lot of those notes that you just mentioned. So, I said, for listeners who are interested in that, I'll include that in the show notes.
Can I add one more thing, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that the what I want to say here is so important in terms of the message, is that I want everyone to hear that we are here to serve. We're humans that are relationship oriented, and our role is to serve others. And that's why whatever skills and training that I had mentioned earlier are necessary is to be a better servant for others in order to make those positive outcomes that are meaningful to others in their culture, norms, values, and context. So we're servants. We're here to serve.
Can't think of better words to end on. Dr. Lina Slim, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.